I am now delighted to move on to our next champion. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to Melina Laboucan-Massimo, who is Lubicon Cree from Northern Alberta. Melina has worked on the social, environmental and climate justice issues for the past 20 years and is the Just Transition Director at Indigenous Climate Action and the founder of Sacred Earth Solar. She's also the host of a new TV series called Power to the People, which profiles renewable energy, food security and eco-housing projects in Indigenous communities across Canada. And I've seen 1 or 2 episodes and I can highly, highly commend it to you. It's an excellent series. So Melina, if I could hand over to you for your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Nicole. Tansegwakia, Nia Melina Miawapin Laboucan-Massimo Nia Nihao Kines Kumtanawao. Thank you for having me today. I would like to thank the Canadian Law Institute for this award and extend my gratitude to all of those who are working hard to address the climate crisis, including my fellow climate champions. My vision of a net zero world is one where Canada respects and upholds the sovereignty and knowledge of Indigenous peoples, implementing a just transition and committing to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are essential to a net zero pathway. Prioritizing Indigenous peoples and communities who bear the brunt of environmental contamination in their homelands is critical. A net zero future means that we no longer have sacrifice zones or sacrificed communities. It is with these justice tenets in mind that I accept this nomination. I myself come from a community that is a sacrifice community. We have felt the brunt of environmental contamination since I was born. The toxic burden that we bear is a lived reality in communities and Indigenous communities alike. It is a burden we shoulder for the rest of Canadian society and our global addiction to oil. The compromised water and air we drink, water we drink and air we breathe reminds me every day that our current system is unsustainable and an unacceptable cost to communities. I need to mention that before colonization occurred here on this continent, Indigenous peoples were thriving in a healthy and balanced ecosystem. It is no coincidence that it was the case, that this land was in pristine condition, teeming with abundance, because Indigenous peoples knew how to live in a reciprocal relationship with the land. Indigenous peoples' cultural practices fostered a deep sense of responsibility to take care of the land and to live in reciprocity with the land, which allowed both to thrive. For us to truly solve this climate crisis, we need a global paradigm shift back to understanding and living within the natural laws of our earth. We must relearn how to live in reciprocity with the land. It comes as no surprise, as indicated by our current climate crisis, that humans do not actually have dominion over the earth, nor should they. Our relationship with the natural world cannot be transactional. It cannot be a transactional one because we have seen time and time again this fail. As a shift to an Indigenous framework of relationship with the earth is at the heart of a solution-oriented climate action. This needs to be a widespread understanding of what Indigenous peoples have always known. What we do to the land, we do to ourselves. Humanity has lost this sacred connection to the earth, and this is why we are now living in an era of consequence. Indigenous peoples safeguard 80% of the world's biodiversity. It is critical that we, in turn, safeguard the people who protect the lands and waters that give us all life. Yet today, here in Canada and around the world, Indigenous land defenders are being criminalized for standing up to protect their homelands. A just transition places Indigenous communities at the forefront of an energy transition to ensure that our future energy system does not reproduce the imbalances or inequities of the current one. Indigenous peoples are already leading the way towards this transition, which is amazing, because I have been from coast to coast to coast in Indigenous communities throughout my time as a climate campaigner and while filming the TV show Power to the People, which profiles renewable energy, eco-housing, and food security in Indigenous communities across this country. What I heard was a resounding yes to the urgent climate action in Indigenous communities. This is why I decided to build a solar project in my own home community, which is in the heart of the tar sands, with a 20.8 kilowatt system, which actually empowers our health center, and why I founded Sacred Earth Solar and why I helped co-found Indigenous Climate Action. It was actually the first time I saw in my community the ability to dream and vision together about the future that we wanted to see, one where we were the decision makers of how we would produce energy. There are already over 2,500 Indigenous-led renewable energy projects and stories like ours across this country. with over 200 of those being large-scale revenue-generating projects. The revenues generated create a multitude of benefits and flow back to the communities as opposed to flowing out of the community. This actually creates energy democracy, where communities are decision makers and a part of the solution. So we need to see investment in renewable energy projects, more robust, progressive renewable energy policies, and foster support for community ownership models that support this transition. The transition itself must be equitable, as it redresses past harms and creates a new relationship of power for the future through reparations and true reconciliation. Not solely lip service to these ideals, but actual legislation and policies that commit to giving land back to Indigenous communities so that they can be stewards of their homelands once again. This is the future that we want to see, and these are achievable climate solutions. A first few steps as I end towards reducing our GHG emissions to truly achieve net zero include respecting the rights and decisions of Indigenous peoples to say no to extraction in their homelands, implementing UNDRIP and free, prior, and informed consent as a legislative requirement, ending fossil fuel subsidies to the industries that are responsible for fueling the climate crisis, canceling the Trans Mountain Pipeline, ensure that we are not investing in false solutions of unproven techno fixes, perpetuating the idea that we can burn now and pay later, which also means that we need to halt the expansion of the tar sands. And of course, invest in renewable energy programs and policies that usher in an energy democracy that we need to see. There is no climate justice without Indigenous sovereignty. We can build a brighter future for generations to come, but we must, as human beings, relearn how to live in reciprocity and in sacred relationship with Mother Earth once again. Hi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melina. That was really insightful and very moving as well. I'm struck with the era of consequence. I think that is such an important phrase to remember, and one that is never truer of how we're approaching this question now, and the consequences that we're making for ourselves.